My daughter asked me to stand and explain to a room full of donors why my pledge card said $50 instead of the suggested minimum of $500. I was holding a paper plate with 2 deviled eggs and the microphone they shoved into my hand. The woman I brought into this world, who once slept on my chest to the rhythm of my heart, smiled from the stage backdrop painted with children's handprints and said, sweet as sugar frosting, Mom, you believe in us, don't you? 40 people turned their faces toward me. Someone coughed. My hand began to shake so hard the egg slid onto the carpet. Lila tilted her head and waited. She always knew how to make me feel 3 inches tall. I said I lived on a pension and Social Security, that $50 was what I could spare that month. She laughed lightly, leaning into the microphone as if she were telling a joke about her clumsy mother. She still thinks $50 buys a bookcase, bless her heart. The audience chuckled, relieved to be guided toward amusement instead of discomfort, and I felt the ground tilt under my sensible shoes. I had spent 32 years balancing other people's accounts at the credit union, learning to spot tiny mismatches that meant big trouble. That's what my life had been, quiet, careful work no one noticed until something went wrong. It was going wrong now, but not in the way the room thought. When I took my seat again, a little card slid under my palm. At first, I thought it was another pledge form, but it was a receipt, my receipt from last month's donor supper, where Lila's foundation had thanked contributors with lasagna and speeches. Only, the foundation's name was misspelled in the header, and the tax number printed at the bottom did not match the one I'd seen on the banner behind Lila. A smudge of pen ink next to the total looked like someone had hastily changed a 3 to an 8. I tucked it into my handbag, feeling the same chill I felt when a column refused to reconcile by 12 cents. That 12 cents always led somewhere. After the applause, as guests lined up for raffle baskets, Lila kissed my cheek, so close I could smell her perfume and the champagne she'd been sipping with the bankers at the front table. Mom, our matching donor is watching for your name. Think about doing the full 500. It would look good. Her eyes cooled when mine didn't brighten. Don't be a burden on the mission. Give with joy. She sailed away, all hair and heels and command. I sat still, letting the words settle like dust after a demolition. On the way out, the building's night custodian, Mateo, pressed another folded paper into my hand without a word. I didn't open it until I got home, and when I did, I had to sit down fast. It was a screenshot of a bank transfer memo between Bennett Hart's Foundation and Bennett Hart's Event Services, and the receiving account belonged to my daughter's husband. In a town like Greenford, Ohio, people prefer a kind scandal they can dress with charity. The Monday after the fundraiser, I was in the grocery line when our neighbor Mrs. Keller leaned over my cart as if to admire the tomatoes. You must be so proud of Lila, she said, pink lips forming a soft doe of awe. The newspaper said her foundation raised $80,000 in one night. You're lucky to have children who give back. I nodded so I wouldn't cry. I was proud of the little girl who once sorted her crayons by color and cried if she broke one. I was terrified of the woman who had learned to sort people the same way. The humiliations came in a thin, relentless stream. On Tuesday, Lila added me to the family group chat I had never wanted, just to write, Mom is struggling with the new online pledge system. Someone help her please, and a line of laughing emojis followed from her board members, most of whom I had known since they were in braces. On Wednesday, a volunteer approached me at church with a bright clipboard smile. Mrs. Bennett, did you want to upgrade your pledge so we can mark your star gold on the donor wall? It draws other donors in when they see family leading. On Thursday, my grandson told me, very seriously, that Mommy said Grandma sometimes didn't get numbers anymore. I looked into his earnest eyes and felt my lungs fold. But shame did something useful, it sharpened me. I put on my old glasses with the stronger prescription, the ones I'd stopped wearing because my son said they made me look stern, and laid everything out on the kitchen table. The 2 receipts that didn't match, a brochure Lila had mailed to some of my bridge friends, and a board list I printed from the foundation's website. 3 names were listed as officers besides Lila, her husband Mark as treasurer, her friend Kelsey as secretary, and a consultant I didn't recognize. There was an EIN number, a P.O. box, and a slogan about Hearts for Kids. I phoned the number listed for the foundation and listened to the recording. The voice promised your donations would fund art supplies and tutoring stipends. In the background, just before the beep, I heard Mark call out, "Remember the LLC invoice," and someone whisper, "Shh." There are rules in this world you can't charm your way past, and I know them like I know my own birthday. If you tell the public their gifts are tax-deductible, you must be properly registered as a charity in the state and consistent about your filings. If you move money between a nonprofit and a for-profit you control, you document the arm's-length transaction or you don't do it at all. If your treasurer also owns the vendor receiving the bulk of your payments, someone, somewhere, will notice. But in a town where Lila's foundation was the one with photo ops and ribbon cuttings, no one wanted to be the person who noticed. The bank, however, always notices if someone nudges them firmly enough. I called the registrar's office in Columbus and asked for information on the Bennett Hearts Foundation. The woman who answered, calm voice, quick mind, told me their system showed a Bennett Hearts filed as a nonprofit corporation last spring with an address at my daughter's house, but there was no record of charitable registration with the Attorney General's charitable law section and no annual report yet. "Ma'am, are you an officer?" "No," I said, my mouth dry. "I'm her mother and a donor. I'm worried something's off." The pause was long enough for me to imagine her weighing her job against sympathy. If you believe solicitations are being made without proper registration, you can submit a complaint. The office can place an administrative hold noted on the entity. That's not a bank freeze, but banks see our notices. "Do you have documents?" I thought of Lila's laugh into the microphone, of the room tilting, and of my grandson asking if I was getting numbers anymore. "I do," I said. That night, a letter from the foundation arrived in my mailbox. It congratulated me on joining the Gold Giver Circle and thanked me for my repeated generosity. Only, I had made exactly 2 donations, $50 last month and $50 at the fundraiser. The letter listed 3 donations in my name and totaled $1,500. At the bottom, the signature wasn't Lila's quick flourish, but what looked like a shaky attempt to imitate it. I held the letter under the lamp and felt a steadiness settle into me I hadn't known I still possessed. When the phone rang, it was Kelsey, the secretary. "Nora, hi. Lila asked me to remind you about the pledge upgrade. We can run your card for the difference." Her voice sounded lined with fear beneath the chirp. "Kelsey, who prints your receipts?" I asked. "Is it the foundation or the event company?" She hung up. A minute later, my doorbell rang, and there was Mark on my porch with his reasonable smile and a grocery store bouquet. "Nora, we don't want any confusion," he said, one hand still on the bell. "Let us help you with the forms." His eyes flicked past me into the hallway as if he expected to see boxes of medication and unpaid bills. After all, family shouldn't be a burden to the mission. The bouquet rustled. I stepped back so he could see the camera above my door blinking its small red light. "Good night, Mark," I said, and closed the door. Behind it, my printer hummed to life, pulling the complaint form from my downloads like a curtain rising. I have spoken with grief at 3 in the morning and with hunger at noon. Both are honest in their way. That night, I spoke with anger and made it my servant. Mateo met me behind the community center after his shift, eyes darting toward the lot. "I shouldn't," he whispered, "but I hate what they did to you Saturday." He handed me an envelope thick with copies, vendor invoices from Bennett Hearts Event Services LLC, all approved by Mark as treasurer and all with curiously even amounts ending in 00. There was also a spreadsheet of donations that showed a cluster of large gifts credited to Anonymous, the same week money moved out to the event company. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "Lila leaves the office computer unlocked after events," he said. "I take out the trash. Sometimes the trash talks." I scanned the invoices and felt heat rise when I saw my own name listed as an in-kind equipment donor with a value of $4,000. I had loaned them folding chairs once from my church. $4,000 would have paid for the roof we still patched with tar. I called the registrar's office again and asked for the same woman. "It's Patel," she said, and her voice brightened as if we were already allies. "MS. Patel, I have documents that suggest funds are being routed to an officer's company. Receipts with different names. Letters inflating donations. I heard her breath travel the wire. If you can email those, and if you file the charitable complaint with the Attorney General, our system can flag the entity. Banks sometimes impose holds when they receive our notices. We can also request the institution provide signatory documentation. Will my daughter know it's me? Another pause. Your name can be kept confidential in the public record, but in a town, people read between lines. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, a 70-year-old woman in a cardigan, hair clipped back with the same beret I'd worn to Lila's second-grade concert. Do it, I said. Please. And Ms. Patel, thank you. The next day, I went one town over to a law office that had helped our church set up its small food pantry years ago. The lawyer, Mr. Cole, remembered me as the lady who balanced the pantry's receipts down to the nickel. He listened quietly, then said, "You know you can't blow this up without consequences to your family." "Mr. Cole, they already decided I'm a burden," I replied. "Maybe I'll be a useful one." He smiled at that, the way you do when someone tells a joke you weren't expecting. We drafted a short affidavit. I had donated. I had received inconsistent receipts. I had observed funds moving between related entities. I feared continued solicitations would harm the public. He notarized it. When I reached for my purse, he waved me off. Consider it my in-kind donation to a better world. What I didn't expect were the blows that came in the middle of the little victories. Lila called, her voice tight with a kind of fury she only used when someone cheaper than her in high school wore the same dress to prom. "Mom, we have a situation. Someone filed a complaint about our filings. This kind of thing delays grants. Did you talk to anyone?" I stared at the ceiling where a crack ran like a tributary. "I have questions," I said. "Why does the event company share a phone number with your foundation?" "We outsource," she said through her teeth. "It's efficient." "Why is my name inflated on your donor ledger?" "Mom, no one expects elderly donors to understand software." I flinched, and she knew she'd cut. "Look, we'll fix the receipts. But you need to stop meddling. People trust me. They see you doubting, they doubt. Do you want that?" Lila hung up before I could answer. That evening, the folder I kept on the table, receipts, the affidavit, Ms. Patel's emails confirming an administrative hold, went missing. The front door was locked. The window latch had a scratch that hadn't been there that morning. I stood looking at the empty table and felt something inside me go very still, like a lake freezing. Then my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Check your mailbox before midnight. A friend." I pulled on my coat and walked down the steps with my flashlight. The street was quiet. Inside the mailbox, I found a flash drive taped to the side. At my kitchen computer, hands shaking only a little, I opened a folder labeled Speeches plus Real Ledger. There, unreadable to the naked eye but clear to anyone who lived her life in numbers, was the truth. The matching donor Lila bragged about on stage was the event company, money that left one pocket to appear generous before returning to the same pocket minus a neat service fee. The ledger also showed 3 transfers labeled Consultant Retainer to an account in Mark's name. The consultant turned out to be their babysitter's boyfriend, with a 1-page contract that probably took 5 minutes to write. I leaned back, dizzy with anger and relief. The document properties showed it had been generated from a computer registered to Kelsey W. The secretary had found her conscience. The invitation to Family and Founders Brunch arrived the next morning, creamy cardstock with gold letters. Lila loved putting me at the front table so she could show how supportive her family was, my presence as her prop. I decided to go. Sometimes the cleanest battlefield is the one they prepared for themselves. I wore my stern glasses and the navy dress I save for funerals and banks. Before I left, I stopped by the credit union where I used to work and asked the branch manager, an old colleague, what happens when a nonprofit's registration is flagged. "Compliance will review," she said. "We may place a temporary hold pending verification of authorized signers and purpose." I thanked her without explaining why I needed to know. The brunch was at the downtown hotel, sunlight slanting through windows like stage lights. Lila stood near a poster of smiling children. "Mom," she sang out, kissing the air by my cheek. You came. I'm happy you're in such a good, courageous place, she added, sotto voce, as if visiting a fragile patient. Around us, donors clinked glasses and planned their photo angles. Lila took the stage with the grateful poise she wore like a custom suit. Today we celebrate hearts for kids, she said, and people murmured amen. She called the matching donor generous, called Mark tireless, called Kelsey a rock, and called me her why. That last one got a practice sniffle from the second row. I stood when she called for family remarks. This time I kept both hands around the microphone to stop the shaking. Thank you for loving children, I began, voice steady. Thank you for trusting my daughter. When you trust someone, you do not mind a question or two. You welcome it. You answer. So if I may ask a few questions today, as a mother and a donor, I paused. Which EIN should I write on my tax form, the one on your banner or the one on last month's receipts? A breeze of confusion rippled the room. Lila's smile tightened. Mom, let's talk later. Also, which Bennett Hart's entity is the recipient, the foundation, or the event services company that shares your treasurer's cell number? A handful of heads turned toward Mark, whose napkin was suddenly very interesting. Ms. Patel from the registrar's office had shown me how to craft a simple narrative from complex files, and Mr. Cole had warned me to reveal only what was indisputable. I held up a single page. This is the public record of the Foundation's registration. It shows no charitable registration with the Attorney General. It shows your treasurer as an officer and the event services company receiving payments. It also shows the bank's hold notice sent yesterday after the administrative flag. I did not raise my voice. It was not necessary. People hear better when you're not shouting. Mom, Lila said, moving toward me, all silk and urgency. Let's go to the foyer. We'll take care of whatever is upsetting you. She tried to take the microphone, but the hotel's A/V person, a woman with hair dyed the deep blue of someone who liked to be underestimated, moved a step closer to the soundboard and did not cut my audio. Kelsey stood at the side of the room, white as the tablecloths, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles blanched. My grandson, sitting with the babysitter near the pastries, watched with eyes round as planets. I have one more question, I said. Who is the matching donor exactly? Are they anonymous because of modesty or because the donor and the payee are the same? I set the paper down and held up the flash drive. This contains the ledger for those matched nights. The funds looped from the foundation to the event company and back, less fees, the way you might pour water between two cups and call it rain. Someone gasped. A banker in the front row murmured to his colleague, and both looked at their phones. Then the door at the back opened, and our quiet ally walked in. Not Miss Patel, she had done her part already and could not risk more. It was the bank's compliance officer, the same one who had trained me 20 years ago to catch round-tripping and conflicts of interest. She didn't come as a dramatic savior, she came because she'd already called the hotel to ask if a representative could speak to the treasurer privately. Seeing the room, she adjusted in an instant. Excuse me, she said, stepping forward. Mr. Bennett, our institution placed a temporary hold on the foundation accounts this morning pending verification of registrations and vendor relationships. Checks issued today will not clear until we receive documents. Lila's mouth opened and closed like she'd forgotten the direction of air. Mark stood, then sat again, as if unsure whether standing made him look more responsible or more guilty. We give to children, Lila said, voice rising for the first time into something jagged. This is an attack from someone who doesn't understand how modern nonprofits operate. Then explain, I said. We'll wait. The room did, that terrible human silence when a performance collides with a wall. Lila looked to her board. Kelsey's eyes filled. She raised a shaking hand half an inch, like a child in class. There were invoices, she whispered. Mark said it was normal. I typed what he told me. He said the matching donor was the event company and that it was legal because it encouraged giving. A murmur swept the tables like wind through dry grass. The babysitter crossed herself. My grandson leaned into her side. Lila stared at Kelsey with a venom I had only ever seen directed at me. She understood in that second who had been the leak. A voice I had not expected arrived from the back, Mateo, still in his work shirt, standing near the door with his hands clasped. "I take out the trash," he said, not moving. "Sometimes the trash doesn't make it to the bin." The room pivoted its eyes toward him and then toward me, as if recalibrating what an ally looks like. Ms. Patel hadn't come, but her emails had. Mr. Cole wasn't here, but his affidavit was, and now the people who clean our rooms and empty our bins stood up in daylight, and that, more than the paperwork, made something in Lila falter. She reached for Mark's arm and found only air. He had stepped 3 inches away without moving his feet. The board chair, retired principal with an instinct for unruly assemblies, tapped a glass. "We will recess," she said, voice firm. "The board will meet with council. Donors, please enjoy the coffee." The clink of cups sounded like a verdict. Lila looked straight at me, eyes bright with a fury that would have frightened me when I was still hoping to be loved by her shining self. Now it only looked like a child who had never believed the rules could apply to her. "What have you done?" she hissed. I set the microphone down. "I asked a few questions." The registrar answered. The bank listened. "The rest is yours to answer for." She inhaled as if to speak again, then closed her lips, because somewhere in the room, finally, her husband was not looking at her friend was not covering for her, and her son was watching. It moved quickly after that because it had to. The registrar's administrative hold stayed, and the Attorney General's office guided the board through an emergency meeting that removed Lila and Mark from their roles. Kelsey, trembling, turned over the flash drive and her login credentials, crying that she had believed she was helping children. The board chair negotiated with the bank to reopen a separate, clean account under 2 signatures with every payment approved by council. Checks already issued to Bennett Hart's event services were canceled. The event company's owner, Mark, was informed that any legitimate out-of-pocket costs would be audited and repaid only upon proof. Donors received letters explaining their gifts would be either redirected to the public school's arts fund or refunded at their request. Most chose the school. A small parade of angry men came through my Facebook messages that week, calling me a saboteur and worse. The people at the grocery store line divided neatly into those who avoided my eyes and those who mouthed, "Thank you." The consequences for Lila were clean and unglamorous. She signed a consent agreement with the state that required her to return funds and barred her from serving as an officer or director of any charitable organization for a period of years. She released a statement about administrative misunderstandings, which the newspaper printed without the photo they had used for her ribbon cuttings. Mark found that vendors were suddenly unwilling to provide services on handshake deals. The event company dissolved with less ceremony than the opening ribbon had required. As for me, I did the thing no one expected. I agreed to stay for a while in Lila's guest room when the board chair suggested it might help my grandson's routine while the adults sorted the mess. People thought I was softening. I was doing something harder. Under the consent agreement, Lila had to demonstrate she did not use charitable funds for personal benefit and had to provide monthly documentation for household expenses to prove separation. Documentation her lawyer insisted would be easier to compile if a family member could witness the daily reality. I made tea, did school pickups, and quietly logged the receipts she handed over. I asked no questions out loud. The questions lived in my notebook and became the neat little package the auditor later praised for clarity. I was, for a time, exactly the burden she had warned the room against, the burden that requires accountability. When the paperwork was done and my grandson tired of seeing his grandmother every morning at the breakfast table, I told Lila I was going home. She asked if I would stay for Sunday. "We're making pancakes," she said, voice flat with weariness, something human showing through the cracks of her indignation. I kissed my grandson's hair and told him he could come plant tomatoes with me next weekend. Lila, standing in the doorway, lifted her eyes to mine with a look I recognized from her very small childhood when she had done something wrong and didn't yet know how to fix it. "You could have talked to me," she said. "I did," I replied. "You told me not to be a burden." She looked at the floor. She didn't apologize. "That's all right. Not all debts are payable in words." The town moved on, as towns do, leaving a little space in its memory for the day when a mother said the room could wait for answers. I started volunteering at the school library 2 mornings a week, setting out new crayons in small metal cups, watching small hands sort them by color with painstaking care. Ms. Patel sent a brief note from Columbus on state letterhead. "Thank you for helping us do our job." Mr. Cole left a message asking if I wanted to attend a training on board responsibilities for small nonprofits. Mateo waved from the community center and did not say a word about the trash. Kelsey applied for a job in the school office and listed me as a reference. She had learned something about the cost of nodding. People ask if it felt like revenge. It felt like arithmetic. When a column won't reconcile, you look until you find the error, and then you correct it. Sometimes the error is a person you love. That doesn't change the math. The lesson, if there must be one, is small enough to write in the margin. Love isn't blind. It just prefers not to wear its stern glasses. Put them on when the numbers don't add up. Someone is always watching, quietly, ready to help you carry the ledger to daylight. I plant tomatoes in the afternoons now, hands deep in soil, and I think about the room at the brunch, the clink of cups, the press of silence, the moment a hushed place became a courtroom because someone asked questions without raising her voice. Some nights, when the wind taps the pane and the house is otherwise quiet, I hear again the gentle whir of my printer pulling out the complaint form. I ask myself whether I would do it again. I look at my grandson's drawing on my refrigerator, hearts and a crooked house and a garden with 4 fat red tomatoes, and I know the answer.